He is the president of the Animal Wellness Action. Good morning, Wayne. Thank you for coming on to the show and joining us.
The pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So last week, Friday, Senator Pito Terlahi. Sorry, let me turn that off, Jason. I think you're calling me.
Whoops.
I'm in the room. We can just talk, Jason. So last week, Friday, Senator Pito Terlahi, during a session, had introduced this amendment to Bill 185. It's the Pause Act. And according to his press release, it would ensure cockfighting is legal under Guam law. So this amendment officially recognizes cockfighting as a cultural practice under Guam law. The amendment passed without objection, and should the measure be passed into law, cockfighting will be preserved for both current and future cockfighters on Guam. And this is a battle that the animal wellness group has been fighting. I want to say for a couple years now. There was a federal lawsuit and by Sedfrey Linsongen. He was a part of the argument was, cockfighting is a cultural practice, but he was unsuccessful in the federal court. And so I'm wanted to get Wayne on here just to get his reaction about this amendment by Senator Pito Terlahi. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning to you. It's December 21st, of course, and the timing is impeccable. It was December 20th, 1 year ago and 1 day, that the federal law took effect, banning animal fighting all over the country. I want to be clear that it did not single out Guam. It bans animal fighting in every corner of the United States. And since that time, the cockfighting community in Puerto Rico and in Guam sued to try to invalidate this because both Puerto Rico and Guam had legal cockfighting. So this most recent maneuver by the state senator to try to legalize cockfighting is redundant. It already is legal under Guam law. It's just the question of what is the relationship on this issue between the federal government and Guam. And the courts have adjudicated this issue and determined that there is federal supremacy, that the federal government has the authority under the Interstate Commerce Act to forbid cockfighting. And it was a U.S. District Court for the District of Guam and the Northern Marianas that just ruled on this case a few weeks ago. And there was a similar case preceding that by about a year ago, in the U.S. District Court for the District of Puerto Rico in San Juan that ruled the same way. Both cases have been appealed to federal appellate courts, the Guam case to the Ninth Circuit and the Puerto Rico case to the First Circuit. There have been a whole series of challenges by U.S.-based cockfighters against this federal law preceding this latest set of amendments that made it very clear that all federal prohibitions against animal fighting, so the fighting itself, the transport of the animals, the sale of the fighting weapons, being a spectator, many of those things were previously illegal under federal law. What the amendment that took effect 1 year ago, 1 year and 1 day ago did is said that all of those prohibitions apply everywhere in the United States. So I think this is just posturing by the senator. Guam, the reason that this was controversial is that the federal government was superseding the Guam legislature's decision-making on this issue. And I might say that we did a poll to show that Guamanians favor our position overwhelmingly. 61% of Guamanians favor the federal law on cockfighting, 20% oppose, and the rest are undecided. So of those with an opinion, 75% of Guamanians support our position that cockfighting should be outlawed under federal law.
You heard about this through local media, and you were talking to me during the break that you spoke with your friends over at Guam Animals in Need Gain regarding this. And so, what can you tell us a little bit about the conversations you had?
Well, listen, I think that Guam Animals in Need is such an important group. Our poll showed it's a very favorably viewed organization on Guam. that it's doing very important work with strays and fighting cruelty. Sadly, I'm getting many reports of acts of malicious cruelty. Guam used to have 20 animal control officers, now is down to 2. We are constantly, because of our visibility on the cockfighting issue at Animal Wellness Action, get people who write to us through our website and other channels saying, hey, what can we do about cruelty? The Pause Act that has been kicking around in the legislature, that is the one that I believe was the subject of this pro-cockfighting amendment, is a very important law very important proposal to upgrade Guam's anti-cruelty law, to strengthen penalties, to outlaw bestiality. There are a few states and territories that still do not outlaw bestiality. And I just hope that this sideshow over cockfighting and this amendment does not derail an important law. Our poll that showed 3/4 of Guamanians with a strong feeling against cockfighting, 95% of Guamanians wanted to strengthen the anti-cruelty law on the island. 95%. This is a consensus position, and I hope that that law passes very soon and that Governor Guerrero signs it, because it's long overdue on Guam.
You say sideshow. You say this is redundant. For Senator Peter Terlahi, though, for him, it may be that he's relentless because he truly does believe, as well as several other residents on Guam believe, that cockfighting is a cultural practice. And so, what would you say in response?
Well, I think you're right. I think he does feel strongly about it. I think there are a number of Guamanians who are practitioners of cockfighting who feel very strongly about it. And frankly, that's true throughout the United States. There are a bunch of cockfighters in Oklahoma, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisiana, California, who feel very strongly. They think it's their God-given right. They also say it's a cultural right. And frankly, I've been involved in this issue for many years. I led 3 statewide ballot initiatives where citizen initiatives were on the ballot because state legislatures refused to ban cockfighting. They too were being cowed by the cockfighting community. We did ballot measures in Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arizona. They were 3 of the last 5 states to outlaw cockfighting not too long ago. And there were 2 other states that had it legal, New Mexico and Louisiana. We heard this same argument. We heard Cajuns, who are a pretty distinct group in Southwest Louisiana, say it was their cultural right. We had Latinos in New Mexico say it was their cultural right. We had white rural people in Oklahoma say it's their cultural right. This is the argument that's everywhere. And cockfighting was a global activity. It started back in the days of the Romans, more than 2,000 years ago. It spread all over the world as the Roman Empire spread, and then as people fanned out across the world. It has been practiced, of course, in the Philippines and Vietnam and other Asian countries, but all over the world. It's a matter of animal cruelty. I mean, the practice of dogfighting is also invoked as a cultural right by people. And the United States has looked at this issue. There is state authority to ban it. There is territorial authority to ban it. And there's federal authority to ban it. Every single court case that has been decided on this issue has gone in favor of the government's authority to stop cockfighting. Maybe they'll prevail in some future case, but thus far it's been unanimous. Case after case after case has gone in favor. And you can make a cultural argument for anything. I mean, you can say that foot binding is a cultural activity. You can say dueling is a cultural activity. You can say bullfighting in terms of animal cruelty is a cultural activity. I mean, this has been around for a long time, so of course people feel passionate about it, but there's nothing in our Constitution that says you have a cultural right to cockfight. We do have a right to free speech, so no one is attempting to suppress their expression of support of cockfighting. We do have a Second Amendment that's controversial that relates to the right to bear arms. People have different opinions about that, but there's nothing in our Constitution that talks about cockfighting. The Congress overwhelmingly banned the activity. There is not one lawmaker in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives, other than the delegates, who are objecting to this law, to my knowledge. Not one. Not one has signed on to a bill to repeal this federal law to ban animal fighting everywhere. And again, what's most important to me is that the people of Guam support us. When I went to Guam a year ago, I went to the Dome, which was the cockfighting venue. I went to a cockfight there. And, you know, I talked to people throughout Guam. Yes, there's a core of people who are passionate about this. I get it. They care about it. They don't think anything's wrong with it. They have their justifications and rationalizations for it. But most people in Guam think, it's time to end this practice. And we are happy to align ourselves with those Guamanians.
Right, but with this bill, it probably will pass, and it will include, or it does include, this amendment, which Senator Pito Talai says ensures cockfighting is legal under Guam law. That dome that you referred to could be active once again. And really, what can your organization do? I mean, I don't believe it's a priority for local law enforcement officials.
Yeah, it's really not. We've never really argued that the Guam Police Department or other law enforcement have primary responsibility. This is a federal law, and there's a federal law enforcement presence in the United States. You know, that's in the form of many different agencies. It's, of course, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Treasury Department has law enforcement officials. The Department of Homeland Security has folks. There's the U.S. Marshals. But even the United States Department of Agriculture has a law enforcement arm. There are United States attorneys. There's a United States attorney for the District of Guam. All of the United States attorneys are there to enforce our federal laws. And, you know, we never expected Guam PD to be involved. I would, they would not undermine federal authority. And I would hope that folks who are operating the Dome or who are involved understand that it's a felony level penalty. I want to make it clear to your listeners. It's up to 5 years in prison and $250,000 fine for every violation. If you have 100 birds and you're fighting them, you can have 100 counts against you. 100 times 5 is 500 years in jail. It is just not worth the penalty. It is not worth the risk. There are cases across the United States that are being made against cockfighters. The United States busted a whole ring in southern Georgia recently. They had a major cockfighting operator who had been selling to Guam in California. It's not a small matter. And people may believe very fervently that cockfighting is okay. They may think it's a cultural right. But as a legal matter, it's clear. Guam does not have the authority to supersede federal authority on this issue. And I love that cat who just walked across the screen. That's fabulous.
My guest on the show.
Yes, yes. It could happen to me at any point with my two cats.
I'm a dog lover, so. All right.
I've got one of those too.
Well, Mr. Pacelli, thank you so much. So, at the end of the day, in your mind, this amendment in the Pause Act really is, I guess, you could say, just for show, and federal law trumps local law.
Yeah, I think it's clear, and I don't think that this is new ground. I mean, Guam had already affirmed as a legislative matter its support for cockfighting. This was big news a year ago, December 20th, 2019, when the federal law took effect. It had a 1-year delayed provision. We passed it at the end of 2018. There was 1 year so Guam and the other cockfighters in the territories could phase out of the activity. We think they should have by then. They should not even consider the idea of resuming the activity now. And I just want to say for your listeners, we're talking about staged fights between animals for amusement and for gambling. Knives or curved ice picks called gaffs are attached to the bird's legs. They're in a pit from which they cannot escape. They're often pumped full of drugs or vitamins to try to stimulate the birds and enhance their performance. And they stab each other with these blades that are attached to their legs. They cut off the natural spur on the bird's legs, And the knives, it's either a short fight or a long knife fight or a gaff fight. They puncture their eyes, they puncture lungs, they, cut their heart open. This is the same morally as dog fighting. When you stage a fight and have dogs kill each other just so you can enjoy the spectacle, there's something wrong about that for the vast majority of Americans, whether they're in Florida or Washington or Guam or Puerto Rico or anywhere. And frankly, all over the world, people do this. Animal fighting is an archaic practice. We've shed a lot of terrible practices throughout our history of humanity, and it's a darn good thing we have. This is part of our evolution.
All right. Thank you so much, Wayne. Merry Christmas to you. And
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas to you and all of your listeners. Hope you have a great rest of the year and look forward to keeping the dialogue going on this issue.
all right. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Again, that was Wayne Pacelli. He's the president of the Animal Wellness